there, my name is Catherine Phillips and welcome to Allergies in the Kitchen, where we are learning to cook and shop allergy friendly together. Today I have a recipe for sticky meatballs. This is like your classic cocktail meatball with the grape jelly and the barbecue sauce, but I use safe substitutions for my son, and I like to add a whole bunch of veggies to it. I also teach you how I cook up all my veggies and freeze them in order to thaw them out easily and add to recipes and kind of sneak them into things for my kids just to up their nutritional value. This is a really great recipe, so let's get to it.
We are going to turn all of these ingredients into delicious and nutritious sticky meatballs. Here I am just going to clean some baby Bella mushrooms with a damp paper towel. I just wipe them off to get whatever dirt I can off rather than running them under the water, which can make them rubbery. The baby Bellas are my favorite for this because they have a lot more flavor and they get meatier when they're cooked up than just plain old white button mushrooms. I've got my little sous chef here, Asher. He's going to help me by pulling the stems off of the mushrooms before I chop them up. I always save all my little bits and pieces to the mushrooms and carrots and onions, and I make a veggie broth with that to keep on hand. I'm a big advocate of getting kids in the kitchen to help cook along with you. I think it's a great way to get them more involved in their food and just a way to teach them how to be in a kitchen safely. So I try to always find little bits of things that the kids can help me out with. Now I'm going to start chopping up my mushrooms. I like to leave them in larger chunks than the food processor would, so I'm going to chop those up by hand and then I'll get those in the pan. I'm just going to put a spoonful of coconut oil in my pan. My pan's on about medium heat, and then I'm going to add my mushrooms and saute those up. I don't add salt or anything to this because I want my mushrooms to get nice and browned. I'm making a large batch of these veggies so that I can freeze them and pull them out for future meals just to make my meals easier and extra nutritious. So I'm going to go ahead and chop up this whole package of the baby Bella mushrooms. I'm going to start chopping up 2 onions, and I'm going to keep these bits, like I said before, for my veggie broth, so I'm just going to put those to the side. Then you'll see my little sous chef, he's back again. He's going to help me peel the skin off the onions before we put it in the food processor. Now my second little chef has arrived, and they're both going to help me peel my garlic. I do about 4 cloves, maybe a little bit more, depending on their size. And I'm just going to get the skins off and throw that into the food processor with the onions, and I chop it all up really fine. Here I'm going to start adding my carrots. I just put these in the food processor like the onions and I chop them up really good. That way they're not easy to pick out and they cook up really quickly. I have to do this in a couple batches. If I overload it, then they don't get chopped up near as small. So I'll do a couple batches of this and add it into my onions and mushrooms. I do probably about 2/3 of this bag of baby carrots. If I'm using whole carrots, I'll peel those and I use probably 3 to 4 of them depending on their size. And once again, this is for about 4 batches of these veggies. I'll use one in the meatballs in this recipe and then I freeze the others. At this point, I still have not added any seasonings to my veggies. I'm trying to really sweat and get some color on those. I'm gonna add a 1/4 cup of frozen veggie broth. This is veggie broth that I make myself and keep in the freezer. I just find it more economical that way. You can use boxed broth or canned broth, that's safe for you. And like I said, I use about a 1/4 cup of that and then I'll add some salt and pepper to taste. Then I'm going to cover this with a lid and let those carrots cook out. While the heartier veggies cook out on the stove, Alora here is going to help me with the spinach and arugula. We do small batches of this in the food processor to chop it up really tiny, and you have to do a couple batches of this too, like the carrots, otherwise they get caught and they don't get minced up very fine. I find that with my son especially, the smaller these leaves get, the better and the less likely he is to complain about it. When I'm cooking a large batch of veggies like this, I probably use about 2/3 of that container of spinach and arugula. I also do this sometimes with just arugula or with just spinach. It's just whatever greens that you have on hand. I believe I've done it with like mixed salad greens with the kale and stuff too, and it all works out fine. You don't really taste that much of a difference, but it adds a lot of nutrients to it. I'm always looking for ways to add more and more veggies into my kids' diets and my own as well. Once I've added all of my spinach and arugula to the pan, I just stir that around a little bit. It doesn't have to cook much. And then I get it into a bowl to start cooling down. You don't want to add the hot veggies to your meat because 1, it'll burn your hands when you're trying to roll the meatballs, and 2, it will start to cook the meat before you're ready to start cooking it. Now I'm going to start mixing up our meatballs. I start by getting my egg replacer ready. I mix up enough to make 1 Ener-G egg replacer. To make that, it's 1.5 teaspoons of the mix mixed with 2 tablespoons of water. I find it works best with warm water, and I stir that up really good and let that sit for a few minutes. Then for my gluten-free breadcrumbs, I'm going to use crispy rice cereal that you would use for Rice Krispies. You can also use the rice squares, or I use oatmeal or a mix of the two a lot of times. But I add about 1/2 cup of the rice cereal and then just a splash of whatever safe milk I have on hand. And I kind of crush that up with the back of a spoon so that it can start getting like wet breadcrumbs would. This, along with the egg replacer, is going to help bind our meatballs together. Next, I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of nutritional yeast. This adds a cheesy flavor and also a bunch of B vitamins that's usually missing in my son's diet. and it also will help bind them together even more. Then we're gonna add about half a pound of ground beef, and then I add 3/4 cup of our cooked veggies into this. Next, I add about a tablespoon each of garlic powder and onion powder. They have different flavors and hit different parts of your tongue than just the onion and garlic that's already in it. And then I add some salt and pepper and start to mix this up with my hand. It'll all start to come together, and then you'll be able to form your meatballs. I don't do a lot of measuring in my kitchen. I usually just cook by trial and error and add whatever amounts of stuff that I like. So feel free to change up the seasonings and change up the amounts. I use a tablespoon measure to help measure out and form my meatballs, and I rolled out about 22 meatballs here. I prefer to cook them on either parchment paper or a silicone mat like this to help keep the grease and keep them from sticking. This is what they look like before they went into the oven, and they just go into the oven at 425 for about 20 minutes, and they always come out perfectly browned. While my meatballs are cooking, I'm going to get my veggies ready to freeze. I just get freezer bags and I write the date on them. You can write on there what exactly you put in it as well. I usually use about 3/4 cup of veggies in each of my meals, so that's how I'm measuring this out. I usually am cooking for just myself and 2 children, and we usually will have leftovers, not necessarily of these meatballs because they eat them all up, but taco night and spaghetti night, I usually do enough for us to eat on it one more time, and this is the amount that I always add to my meat. Here I have added a 1/4 cup of veggie broth to this pan, and the pan is on about medium heat. And then I add about a cup of apple jelly and a cup of safe barbecue sauce for us. We use the Newman's Own, and our apple jelly is actually some homemade apple jelly that my husband's grandmother makes from her crabapple trees. But I'm sure you can find some safe jelly in this store. A lot of times this is made with grape jelly. I've just found that this apple jelly is quite delicious in it. I whisk that all up, just trying to break up all the jelly and get it all combined. And then I turn the heat up to almost to high, probably on like 8, and let that bubble up. I want that broth to kind of cook out and let it get really good and sticky again. It'll thicken up some. Once it starts to really bubble, I turn it back down to probably like 3, medium-low heat. I let that simmer, stirring occasionally until my meatballs are ready to add. Here my meatballs have just come out of the oven, and you can see that they're nicely browned. It's easier if you let them sit for a few minutes. They kind of don't fall apart as much if you let them sit before you add them to the sauce. Here I didn't really have a whole lot of time, so I just kind of added them quickly, so you can see a couple of them do kind of start to fall apart. But if you let them sit on the pan for about 5 minutes before you add them to the sauce, then they hold together really nicely. As a side on this night, I'm just gonna use this microwaved brown rice. It's this 90-second rice. You just pop it in the microwave. And I like to add coconut aminos to this. This is a replacement for soy sauce. I found the best and cheapest is at Trader Joe's, so that's where we get ours from. And this rice actually came from Aldi. I use this on nights where I need it to be really quick. Sometimes I make noodles and I'll just add the sticky sauce with some coconut aminos to thin it out some, and I'll put that as the side, or I'll cook brown rice on the stove. There's already a whole lot of veggies in the meatballs, so we don't really need another side. But all the sauce from the meatballs will drizzle down over the rice, and it's really, really scrumptious. This is a great night when we actually all three get to eat the same exact plate of food. I do put the rice on the side for my son. He's not really a big fan of rice. He doesn't like the texture very much, but in an effort to get him more accustomed to it, I always add it to his plate anyways, even if he doesn't eat it. And then the rest of us like to eat the sauce all over the rice, and we mix up our meatballs in with the rice, and it's really good. And this is how many I'm putting on their plates to start with, but they always end up getting seconds and thirds, and every meatball is always eaten.
Thank you for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my allergy-friendly content when it goes live. If you have any recipe or video suggestions for the future, you can leave those in the comments below. Give me a follow on Instagram where you can see more meal ideas, allergy-friendly products, and snippets of our allergy life. I hope you come back to my kitchen.